When I think back to that summer, the one where my life changed forever, I still laugh at how it all started. 12 years old and convinced that a cold, syrupy icy from the quick sack a mile down the road was the pinnacle of luxury. It was the middle of a humid Tennessee summer, where the air clung to your skin, and every blade of grass seemed to be plotting how to grow taller overnight. I'd asked my dad for a little cash to fund my indulgence, not a lot, just enough for a sugar rush. Instead of handing over a few crumpled bills, he gave me something far more valuable, a lesson that would shape the rest of my life. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. My dad made it clear that money was something you earned, not something you asked for. He believed in the kind of work ethic that wasn't just preached, but practiced daily. Our modest home on the outskirts of Nashville sat on a quiet street, the kind of place where everyone knew who mowed whose lawn and whose kid accidentally broke the neighbor's mailbox. My dad was the kind of man who didn't just encourage hard work, he demanded it. And so, on a sweltering Saturday morning, I found myself holding a stack of freshly printed business cards that read Dave's Lawns. I stared at those cards like they were a foreign object. My dad had gone all out, 500 glossy rectangles that seemed to mock my icy ambitions. The audacity of it hit me. This wasn't just about one summer or a single treat. This was about teaching me something profound, though at the time, all I could think was how ridiculous it felt to have a brand at 12 years old. Still, I wasn't about to back down. If I was going to earn that IC, I was going to earn it big. The first step was terrifying. I stood at the edge of the driveway, clutching a few cards in my sweaty palm, and stared at the nearest neighbor's house. The thought of knocking on their door made my stomach churn. What if they laughed? What if they said no? The stakes felt enormous, though in hindsight, they were comically low. I walked up to the porch, took a deep breath, and knocked. Rejection came quickly. The first few doors I tried ended with polite smiles and gentle excuses, each one chipping away at my confidence. But then, at house number 4, something changed. The elderly man who opened the door squinted at me, looked at my card, and said, "You know, my lawn does need some attention." That first yes was a rush like no other. It felt like I'd unlocked a secret level in a game I didn't even know I was playing. With that one customer secured, the momentum began to build. By the end of the day, I'd knocked on 50 doors, as my dad had suggested, and secured 6 customers. It felt like a victory, but the real work was yet to come. The next morning, I dragged out our old push mower, a temperamental beast that sputtered to life only after several tries. My first lawn took twice as long as it should have. The grass was thicker than I'd anticipated, and the sun bore down relentlessly. Sweat dripped into my eyes, and my arms ached from wrestling the mower across uneven ground. I finished just as the afternoon heat peaked, collapsing onto the shaded curb with a sense of satisfaction that was entirely new to me. The homeowner handed me a crisp $10 bill, and for a moment, I just stared at it. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd earned it. That feeling was addictive. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly word would spread. By the end of the week, I'd added more customers to my roster. Some were easygoing, happy to pay for an average job. Others were perfectionists, scrutinizing every blade of grass as if their lives depended on it. One particularly picky client called me back after I'd finished to point out a mist patch in the corner of the yard. I spent an extra half hour making it right, silently vowing to be more thorough next time. The business started to snowball. Neighbors told their friends, who told their friends. Soon, I wasn't just mowing lawns, I was edging flower beds and trimming hedges. My dad's insistence on professionalism, even for a kid's summer hustle, began to make sense. Each job led to another, and I started to see the value in those glossy business cards. Unexpectedly, the work began to teach me about more than just money. I learned how to manage my time, balancing chores at home with my newfound responsibilities. I learned how to handle people, their quirks, their demands, and their generosity. One customer, a kind widow, insisted on making me lemonade every time I worked on her yard. Another slipped me an extra $5 one afternoon, saying I reminded him of his grandson. It wasn't all smooth sailing. Halfway through the summer, I hit my first major obstacle. Our old mower finally gave up the ghost in the middle of a job, leaving me stranded with half a lawn cut and no way to finish. I had to borrow a neighbor's mower, swallowing my pride as I explained the situation. It was humbling, but it also drove home the importance of being prepared. That evening, I sat down with my dad to discuss reinvesting in the business. We decided to buy a second-hand mower with part of my earnings, a decision that felt both exciting and daunting. Looking back, that first summer was the beginning of something much bigger than I'd imagined. I didn't know it then, but I was laying the foundation for a mindset that would carry me through life. It wasn't just about earning money, it was about taking control of my circumstances, about turning challenges into opportunities. That summer taught me that success isn't handed to you, you have to knock on doors, even when it's uncomfortable, and keep pushing, even when the mower breaks down. By the end of the season, I'd saved more than enough for an IC. But by then, the IC wasn't the point. I discovered something far sweeter, the thrill of building something from scratch, the pride in a hard day's work, and the realization that I was capable of more than I'd ever thought possible. As I stood in line at the quick sack, clutching that first dollar I'd earned, I couldn't help but smile. This was only the beginning. I'd like to say that everything after that first successful week was smooth sailing, but life had other plans. The reality of juggling school, chores, and a growing lawn care business quickly became apparent. By the second week, the initial excitement of earning my own money had worn off, replaced by the grueling routine of early mornings and late afternoons spent mowing, raking, and trimming. What started as a fun challenge now felt more like a marathon. The Tennessee summer didn't let up. Each day brought relentless heat, and I soon learned the importance of hydration. A forgotten water bottle meant enduring hours of sticky discomfort, and I'd come home covered in grass clippings, dirt, and the distinct smell of sweat. My arms ached constantly, and I developed blisters on my hands from gripping the mower handles too tightly. Despite these physical challenges, I found a strange kind of satisfaction in pushing through. Each completed lawn was a small victory, a tangible result of my hard work. But just as I began settling into this new rhythm, an unexpected hurdle appeared. One of my clients, a particularly meticulous homeowner with an immaculate front yard, called to complain about a job I'd done the day before. Apparently, I'd missed a narrow strip of grass near the fence line, something I hadn't even noticed. Her tone was sharp, almost accusatory, and it stung. I'd prided myself on doing a good job, and this felt like a personal failure. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the afternoon brooding. The thought of losing a client, even one, felt catastrophic. My dad's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me that professionalism wasn't optional. Swallowing my pride, I loaded up the mower and headed back to her house to fix the issue. It was a small patch of grass, barely noticeable, but I made sure to go over the entire lawn again just to be thorough. When I finished, she seemed satisfied, though she didn't offer any praise or acknowledgement. It was a humbling experience, one that taught me an early lesson about accountability and customer service. The challenges didn't stop there. As the weeks went on, I began noticing the toll this new venture was taking on my free time. Saturdays, once reserved for cartoons and riding bikes with friends, were now consumed by work. My friends teased me about missing out, calling me lawn boy, and joking about how I'd end up mowing grass for a living. While their comments were mostly in good fun, they hit a nerve. For the first time, I wondered if I'd taken on more than I could handle. Just when I thought I had reached my limit, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A neighbor a few streets over approached me with a proposition. He needed someone to tackle his overgrown backyard, which had turned into a jungle of weeds and wild grass. It was far beyond the usual scope of my work, but the payment he offered was too tempting to refuse. I agreed, underestimating just how much effort the job would require. When I arrived, the sight of the yard nearly made me turn around. Waist-high weeds and thick underbrush covered every inch of the space. It was clear that this yard hadn't been maintained in years. Armed with my basic tools, a mower, a rake, and a pair of pruning shears, I dove in. The first hour was grueling. The mower struggled against the dense vegetation, and the shears barely made a dent in the thicker branches. Sweat poured down my face, and my hands throbbed from the constant strain. Halfway through, the mower's blade jammed on a hidden rock, and I had to stop to make repairs. Despite the setbacks, I pushed through. By the end of the day, the yard was transformed, though my body felt like it had been through a war. The homeowner was thrilled with the results and paid me extra for my effort. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming, but it also came with a realization I couldn't keep working like this without better equipment and a clearer plan. That night, I sat down with my dad to reevaluate my approach. We talked about reinvesting some of my earnings into upgrading my tools. It felt risky to spend the money I'd worked so hard to earn, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted to keep growing the business. We decided on a used gas-powered mower and a set of professional-grade clippers, both of which made an immediate difference in my efficiency. With the new equipment, I was able to take on bigger jobs and complete them faster. My confidence grew, and so did my reputation. Word of mouth continued to spread, and I started receiving calls from people outside the neighborhood. It was exhilarating but also daunting. Managing multiple clients meant juggling schedules and keeping track of different preferences. I started carrying a small notebook to jot down notes about each yard, which areas needed extra attention, which clients preferred shorter cuts, and which ones wanted additional services like edging or weeding. Through all this, I began to understand the value of systems. Without realizing it, I was building the foundation of a business model, one based on efficiency, attention to detail, and a commitment to quality. But the work wasn't without its sacrifices. I often came home too tired to do anything but collapse on the couch. My schoolwork began to suffer slightly, and I found myself longing for the carefree days of childhood that now seemed so distant. As the summer wore on, I faced moments of doubt. Was this all worth it? The money was good, but at what cost? My dad's encouragement kept me going. He reminded me that hard work builds character and that the lessons I was learning would serve me well in the future. Deep down, I knew he was right, though I couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. Looking back, that period of struggle was a turning point. It tested my resolve and forced me to grow in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about mowing lawns anymore, it was about proving to myself that I could handle challenges, that I could rise above the difficulties and come out stronger on the other side. And though I didn't realize it at the time, those lessons would stay with me long after the summer ended. The weeks following that turning point were nothing short of relentless. By now, I had upgraded my equipment and expanded my customer base, but the work itself had evolved into something much more demanding. The initial thrill of running my own business had given way to the reality of juggling numerous responsibilities. Every morning began with a glance at my notebook, where I meticulously listed the day's jobs, tools required, and any special requests from clients. My evenings were spent updating that same notebook with notes about payments collected and tasks still pending. Tennessee's unrelenting summer heat became a constant companion, amplifying every challenge. With sweat dripping from my forehead, I mowed lawn after lawn, each yard presenting its own set of obstacles. Some days, it was uneven terrain, other days, it was a stubborn patch of weeds that refused to yield. I began to dread the unmistakable buzz of mosquitoes that seemed to view me as an all-you-can-eat buffet. Despite the physical toll, there was something immensely satisfying about standing back and admiring a perfectly manicured lawn. It was proof of my effort, tangible and immediate. The monotony was broken by an unexpected request. A homeowner, one of my regular clients, asked if I could help with a landscaping project. She wanted to redo her flower beds and add a small stone pathway leading to her garden. This wasn't in my wheelhouse, but her offer was generous, and I was eager to try something new. Armed with a wheelbarrow, a borrowed shovel, and some vague instructions she'd printed off the internet, I dove into the project. What followed was a comedy of errors. The stones for the pathway were heavier than I anticipated, and arranging them in a straight line proved far trickier than it looked. At one point, I spilled an entire bag of mulch, creating a mess that took nearly an hour to clean up. Yet, by the end of the weekend, the transformation was complete. The homeowner was thrilled, and I walked away with a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the usual satisfaction of a job well done. It was my first taste of branching out, of seeing the potential to diversify and expand my business beyond mowing lawns. As the summer progressed, word of my services spread beyond my immediate neighborhood. I began receiving calls from clients in nearby areas, each job more challenging than the last. Some were straightforward, like trimming hedges or cleaning up debris after a storm. Others were downright bizarre, like the eccentric elderly man who asked me to mow an intricate maze pattern into his backyard grass. Despite the absurdity of some requests, I rarely said no. Each new challenge felt like a chance to prove myself and grow. Then came the day when I pushed myself too far. One Saturday, I ambitiously scheduled back-to-back jobs, leaving no room for breaks. By the time I reached the fourth lawn, exhaustion had set in. My arms felt like lead, and I struggled to keep the mower on course. Halfway through the yard, I accidentally ran over a hidden sprinkler head, causing the blade to jam and the engine to stall. Frustrated and embarrassed, I had to explain the situation to the homeowner and offer to pay for the damage. It was a humbling experience and a stark reminder of the dangers of overcommitting. That evening, as I sat in my room nursing a bruised ego, I realized I needed to set boundaries. It wasn't enough to take on every job that came my way, I needed to prioritize quality over quantity. The next morning, I revised my schedule, leaving buffer time between jobs to account for unforeseen setbacks. I also decided to invest in better tools, including a heavy-duty mower capable of handling tougher terrain. The financial hit was significant, but it felt like a necessary step toward sustainability. By mid-July, I'd hit a rhythm. My clients were happy, my equipment was reliable, and I'd even managed to recruit a friend to help with some of the heavier tasks. Splitting the workload not only eased the physical strain but also introduced a new dynamic to the business. My friend, let's call him Ben, had a knack for spotting opportunities I'd overlooked, like offering seasonal services such as gutter cleaning or leaf removal. With his help, I started marketing these add-ons to my existing clients, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Of course, not everything went according to plan. One particularly memorable mishap involved an aggressive dog that escaped its owner's backyard while I was mowing. The sight of a growling Labrador barreling toward me was enough to send me sprinting for the fence. I managed to climb over just in time, leaving the mower running in the middle of the yard. The dog's owner eventually retrieved it, and though the incident ended without injury, it left me shaken. From that point on, I made it a point to double-check for loose gates and roaming pets before starting any job. Another unexpected event came in the form of a surprise inspection from the Homeowners Association in one of the neighborhoods I serviced. Apparently, someone had reported me for operating an unlicensed business, a claim that left me both irritated and amused. My dad stepped in to help me navigate the bureaucracy, and after filling out a mountain of paperwork and paying a small fee, I was officially licensed to operate. The experience taught me an important lesson about the administrative side of running a business, something I hadn't considered before. Despite the challenges, that summer marked a period of immense growth. I learned to adapt, to think on my feet, and to view setbacks as opportunities for improvement. The money I earned was more than I'd ever imagined making at my age, but the real reward was the sense of independence and self-reliance I'd developed. I was no longer just a kid with a mower, I was a business owner, albeit a small one. By the time August rolled around, I felt like I'd lived an entire lifetime in those few months. The long hours, the blisters, the mishaps, they all blended together into a whirlwind of experiences that left me both exhausted and exhilarated. As I stood in my driveway one evening, counting the cash I'd earned that day, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride. This was my hustle, my achievement, and I knew it was only the beginning. The end of July brought with it a sense of accomplishment, but also a deeper realization: running a business wasn't just about mowing lawns or completing tasks. It was about understanding the bigger picture. My dad had always been a firm believer in learning through doing, and that summer, I learned a lesson that went far beyond blades of grass and edging tools. It started one evening, when he sat me down at the kitchen table and introduced me to the concept of a profit and loss statement. At first, I didn't fully understand why this mattered. After all, I was making money, wasn't I? But as my dad began walking me through the numbers, the truth hit me. The shiny figure I had in my head wasn't my true profit. Between the cost of gas for the mower, repairs, new equipment, and the occasional misstep, like paying for the sprinkler head I'd broken, my earnings were significantly less than I thought. Seeing it all written down on paper was humbling. It was like holding up a mirror to my efforts and realizing they weren't as efficient as they could be. That night, I committed to running my business smarter. I started keeping detailed records of every expense, no matter how small. Every gallon of gas, every replacement part, every roll of garbage bags for lawn clippings went into my notebook. I also began tracking my time more carefully, noting how long each job took and comparing it to the amount I earned. It became clear that some clients, despite paying well, required so much extra effort that they weren't worth the time. This newfound awareness led me to make some tough decisions. I had to let go of a few clients who, while pleasant enough, demanded more than I could reasonably provide. It wasn't an easy call, but it freed up time to focus on clients who valued my work and paid accordingly. The result was a leaner, more efficient schedule that allowed me to take on additional jobs without feeling overwhelmed. Around this time, I encountered another unexpected challenge, a dissatisfied client. One of my regulars, known for her perfectly maintained garden, called to complain that I'd missed a few spots in her yard. Her tone was sharp, almost accusing, and it took me by surprise. I'd prided myself on my thoroughness, and her complaint felt like a personal attack. After stewing over it for a while, I decided the best course of action was to fix the mistake. When I arrived at her house, I didn't just address the areas she'd pointed out, I went over the entire lawn again, ensuring every blade of grass was cut to perfection. By the time I was done, her yard looked better than ever. She didn't say much, but I could tell she was pleased. It wasn't until later that I realized this wasn't just about keeping a client happy. It was about holding myself to a higher standard, about taking pride in my work even when no one was looking. With each passing week, I found myself becoming more confident in my abilities. I began anticipating problems before they arose, like carrying extra tools for quick fixes or checking for obstacles before starting a job. I also started to see the value in presentation. My dad had always said that appearance mattered, and I took that to heart. I made sure my tools were clean, my clothes were neat, and my demeanor was professional. It wasn't just about doing the work, it was about showing clients that I took their lawns, and their trust, seriously. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened that shifted my perspective even further. I was working on a lawn when a neighbor approached me. He was an older man, retired, and he struck up a conversation about the work I was doing. As we talked, he shared stories about his own career, about the lessons he'd learned and the mistakes he'd made. His advice was simple but profound: always think about the long game. It's not just about today's work. It's about building something that lasts. That conversation stuck with me. Up until then, I'd been so focused on the day-to-day grind that I hadn't considered the bigger picture. What was I building? What did I want this experience to mean in the long run? It wasn't just about making money or pleasing clients. It was about learning, growing, and setting the foundation for the kind of person I wanted to become. The remainder of the summer became a balance of hustle and reflection. I started thinking more strategically about how I approached my work. I looked for ways to add value, like offering to trim hedges or clean up flower beds as part of my service. I also began asking clients for feedback, something I'd been too shy to do before. Their responses were overwhelmingly positive, but they also gave me ideas for improvement. By the time August rolled around, my business had transformed. What started as a simple way to earn pocket money had become something much more meaningful. I'd learned the importance of accountability, the value of hard work, and the power of building relationships. Each lesson felt like a building block, something I could carry with me into the future. Looking back, that summer wasn't just about mowing lawns. It was about discovering what I was capable of, about pushing myself beyond my comfort zone and realizing that growth often comes from the toughest challenges. And while the money was great, the real reward was something far more valuable: the knowledge that I could face obstacles, learn from them, and come out stronger on the other side. August brought a newfound energy to my summer hustle. By now, I'd streamlined my business, shed less profitable clients, and embraced a rhythm that balanced efficiency with quality. My tools were reliable, my clients were loyal, and I'd begun to see the potential for something bigger. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to opportunities, I was actively seeking them out. This shift began with a simple observation. As I worked on lawns, I noticed how many yards had overgrown hedges, unkempt flower beds, or damaged fences. These were areas homeowners often ignored, yet they affected the overall look of their properties. It struck me that I could offer more than lawn care. I could position myself as a one-stop solution for outdoor maintenance. I started small. With a few extra tools purchased from a local hardware store, I added hedge trimming and basic landscaping to my list of services. At first, I offered these extras to existing clients as a way to test the waters. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Many clients were thrilled to have someone handle these eyesores, and they were willing to pay well for the convenience. One client's request stood out. She wanted a complete backyard overhaul, transforming her neglected space into a functional patio area with trimmed hedges, cleaned pathways, and freshly planted flowers. The project was far beyond anything I'd done before, but the challenge intrigued me. I spent hours researching online, watching tutorials, and sketching out a plan. When the day came to start, I worked from sunrise to sunset, pouring all my energy into making her vision a reality. The result was better than I'd imagined. She was ecstatic, and her glowing praise sparked a wave of new referrals. However, with growth came new complications. Expanding my services meant juggling more tools, schedules, and expectations. My notebook, once a reliable companion, was now cluttered with overlapping tasks and reminders. I realized I needed a better system. My dad suggested using an old laptop to create a basic spreadsheet for tracking jobs, payments, and expenses. It was a game changer. For the first time, I could see my entire operation laid out in one place, and it gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt before. Just as things seemed to be falling into place, an unexpected twist disrupted my momentum. A new competitor arrived in the neighborhood, another kid, slightly older, with flashy equipment and bargain basement prices. He went door to door, offering to undercut my rates by nearly half. At first, I didn't take him seriously. But within weeks, a handful of my clients had switched to his service. The sting of rejection was sharp, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being outplayed. Rather than wallow in frustration, I took it as a challenge. If I couldn't compete on price, I'd compete on value. I doubled down on quality, ensuring every lawn I mowed was immaculate, every hedge perfectly trimmed, and every interaction professional. I also began emphasizing reliability, something the bargain competitor struggled with. Clients soon noticed the difference. A few who had switched returned, apologizing for underestimating the value of consistent, high-quality service. Amid this rivalry, an opportunity arose that tested my growing ambition. One of my more influential clients, who owned several rental properties, approached me with a proposition. He wanted me to handle the maintenance for all his properties, including landscaping, trash cleanup, and minor repairs. The scope was daunting, but the potential income was too significant to ignore. I spent a full day deliberating. Taking on such a large project would mean stepping out of my comfort zone and possibly hiring help. In the end, I decided to take the leap. I enlisted a friend, Ben, who'd helped me with occasional jobs before. Together, we tackled the properties one by one, dividing tasks to maximize efficiency. The work was grueling, but the experience of managing a larger operation gave me invaluable insights into delegation and teamwork. Still, not everything went smoothly. During one particularly hectic week, I accidentally scheduled 2 jobs at the same time. The mix-up resulted in a frantic scramble to appease both clients, one of whom threatened to drop me altogether. It was a wake-up call. No matter how ambitious I became, attention to detail couldn't be sacrificed. I updated my spreadsheet system to include automatic reminders and double-checked every booking going forward. By late August, my business had transformed yet again. What started as a solo venture with a push mower had grown into a small operation with diverse services and a steady stream of income. I'd learned to navigate competition, manage larger projects, and adapt to unforeseen challenges. More importantly, I'd begun to see the long-term possibilities of entrepreneurship. This wasn't just a summer job anymore, it was the foundation for something far greater. One evening, as I counted the cash I'd earned that week, a thought struck me. What if this was just the beginning? The skills I was developing, time management, problem solving, customer service, weren't limited to lawn care. They were building blocks for any future I chose to pursue. The ambition I'd felt at the start of the summer had grown into something much deeper, a drive to create, to grow, and to see just how far I could go. September arrived with a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The intensity of the summer had tested every ounce of my energy, but the results spoke for themselves. My business was flourishing, my clients were pleased, and I'd saved more money than I'd ever imagined possible. Yet, just when I thought I had everything under control, the universe decided to throw me a curveball that would shake my confidence and force me to rethink my approach. The trouble began innocently enough. One Friday afternoon, I was midway through mowing a lawn when my trusted mower sputtered and died. At first, I assumed it was a simple issue, maybe it had run out of gas or the blade was jammed. But after a few minutes of tinkering, it became clear that this was no ordinary malfunction. The engine refused to start, and no amount of coaxing would bring it back to life. With half a lawn left uncut and no backup mower on hand, I was forced to explain the situation to my client. While they were understanding, the experience left me deeply frustrated. This wasn't just a one-off inconvenience, it was a glaring reminder of how vulnerable my business was to equipment failures. Over the weekend, I took the mower to a repair shop, only to be told that fixing it would cost almost as much as buying a new one. Faced with a tough decision, I opted to invest in a new mower, a more reliable, professional-grade model that would hopefully prevent similar setbacks in the future. The financial hit was significant, but the challenges didn't stop there. With my schedule already packed, the delay caused by the broken mower snowballed into a series of missed appointments and rescheduled jobs. Some clients were patient, but others were less forgiving. One even decided to hire a different service, citing my recent inconsistency as the reason. It was a hard pill to swallow, especially since I'd worked so hard to build a reputation for reliability. As I scrambled to get back on track, another unexpected obstacle arose. A storm swept through the area, leaving fallen branches and debris scattered across many of my clients' yards. While this presented an opportunity to offer cleanup services, it also added a new layer of complexity to an already hectic schedule. I found myself working longer hours than ever, trying to juggle routine lawn care with the additional demand for storm cleanup. One particularly chaotic day stands out in my memory. I'd booked for jobs back-to-back, underestimating how much time each would take. By the time I reached the third client, I was already behind schedule and mentally drained. As I rushed to finish the job, I accidentally ran over a hidden sprinkler head, causing water to gush everywhere. The homeowner was understandably upset, and I had to dip into my earnings to cover the repair cost. It was a low point, one that made me question whether I'd taken on more than I could handle. In the aftermath of these setbacks, I took a step back to reassess my approach. It was clear that my business had grown beyond the point where I could manage everything on my own. If I wanted to maintain the quality of my work while avoiding burnout, I needed to rethink how I operated. The solution came in the form of delegation. I reached out to Ben, who had helped me earlier in the summer, and offered him a more consistent role in the business. Together, we divided the workload, allowing us to cover more ground without sacrificing quality. I also began prioritizing better communication with my clients. Whenever delays or issues arose, I made it a point to notify them immediately and offer solutions. While this didn't always prevent complaints, it did help preserve trust and goodwill. Over time, I learned that clients were often more forgiving when they felt informed and respected. Another lesson came from my dad, who reminded me of the importance of building a safety net. Until that point, I'd been operating with little room for error, reinvesting most of my earnings back into the business. While this had fueled my growth, it left me vulnerable to unexpected expenses. Following his advice, I set aside a portion of my income as an emergency fund. It wasn't much at first, but knowing I had a financial cushion gave me a sense of security I hadn't felt before. By the end of September, the chaos had subsided, and I'd emerged from the experience with a renewed sense of purpose. The setbacks had been humbling, but they also taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, adaptability, and the importance of planning for the unexpected. My business wasn't just surviving, it was evolving, shaped by the challenges I'd faced and the solutions I'd implemented. Looking back, that period of struggle felt like a rite of passage. It was a reminder that growth isn't always linear and that setbacks, while painful, often pave the way for greater success. As I prepared to wrap up the season and focus on school, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Despite the obstacles, I'd proven to myself that I could overcome adversity and come out stronger on the other side. And in the process, I'd laid the foundation for a future that felt full of promise and possibility. October arrived, and with it, the first hints of cooler air and falling leaves. The heat of summer was behind me, but the lessons it had imparted were fresh in my mind. After the chaos of setbacks and frantic recoveries, my business had reached a point of stability. But just as I began to feel comfortable, an unexpected encounter shifted my perspective once again. One afternoon, while finishing a routine lawn job, a man approached me from across the street. He was older, with a confident stride and the kind of presence that demanded attention. He introduced himself as Mr. Hawthorne, a retired landscaper who had spent decades building a successful business in the area. I'd seen him around the neighborhood but never thought much about who he was or what he did. Mr. Hawthorne told me he'd been watching my work over the summer and was impressed by my dedication and hustle. He offered to share some advice, and though I was initially hesitant, his friendly demeanor put me at ease. Over the next few weeks, we struck up an informal mentorship. He shared stories from his career, practical tips for managing clients, and strategies for scaling a small business. His insights were invaluable, not only because of his experience, but because he'd faced many of the same challenges I was encountering. One piece of advice that stood out was his emphasis on reputation. He explained that in a service industry, your name was your most valuable asset. A single unhappy client could tarnish years of hard work, but going the extra mile, even when it wasn't required, could turn customers into lifelong advocates. Inspired by this, I began finding small ways to exceed expectations, like tidying up flower beds or trimming overgrown bushes without being asked. The positive feedback I received reinforced the value of these small gestures. Around this time, another opportunity arose that pushed me to think bigger. A local community center was organizing a cleanup event and needed volunteers to help spruce up the grounds. They weren't offering payment, but they promised recognition for anyone who contributed. At first, I hesitated. My schedule was already packed, and taking on unpaid work seemed counterintuitive when I was trying to grow my business. But after some thought, I realized the potential benefits. The event would be a chance to network, showcase my skills, and give back to the community that had supported me. On the day of the cleanup, I loaded my tools into my dad's truck and headed to the center. The work was harder than I'd anticipated. The grounds were overgrown with weeds, and years of neglect had left the flower beds in shambles. But as more volunteers arrived and we worked together, the transformation began to take shape. By the end of the day, the community center looked completely revitalized, and the sense of accomplishment was palpable. The recognition I received for my efforts exceeded my expectations. The organizers mentioned my contribution in a community newsletter, and a few attendees reached out afterward to inquire about my services. One even offered me a contract to maintain their business's landscaping, a deal that significantly boosted my income and confidence. It was a powerful reminder of the importance of visibility and the unexpected rewards of stepping outside my comfort zone. Mr. Hawthorne's mentorship also encouraged me to think more strategically about the future. He challenged me to envision where I wanted my business to go, not just for the next season but for the years ahead. For the first time, I began considering the idea of turning my summer hustle into something more permanent. It was a daunting thought, but the more I explored the possibilities, the more excited I became. With his guidance, I started experimenting with new services. Fall brought an influx of leaf cleanup requests, which quickly became a lucrative addition to my offerings. I also began researching ways to incorporate eco-friendly practices, like composting grass clippings and using electric equipment to reduce noise and emissions. These small changes not only appealed to environmentally conscious clients but also set me apart from competitors. Of course, the road wasn't without bumps. Balancing school, work, and my growing ambitions proved to be a constant challenge. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, questioning whether I'd taken on too much. But every time I faced a hurdle, I thought back to Mr. Hawthorne's advice: focus on the long game. He'd often remind me that setbacks were temporary and that perseverance would always pay off in the end. By the end of October, my business had reached new heights. The lessons I'd learned from Mr. Hawthorne, the connections I'd made through the community cleanup, and the innovations I'd introduced had all contributed to my growth. But more than that, they had changed the way I saw myself. I was no longer just a kid with a lawnmower. I was a young entrepreneur, building something meaningful one step at a time. Looking back, I realized that the unexpected help I'd received, from my dad, from Ben, and now from Mr. Hawthorne, had been instrumental in shaping my journey. It wasn't just about the work I'd done, it was about the people who had believed in me and the opportunities I'd seized along the way. As the season wound down and the leaves continued to fall, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for how far I'd come and an even greater sense of anticipation for what lay ahead. November brought with it a sense of finality. The days grew shorter, the mornings colder, and the vibrant greens of summer gave way to the muted browns and yellows of fall. For most of my clients, lawn care season was winding down. Yet, I was determined to end the year on a high note. My goals had grown from simply spending money to achieving something truly memorable, a goal that would cap off this transformative journey. One of my ambitions was to save enough money to buy a new bike. Not just any bike, but the sleek, high-performance model I'd been eyeing for months. It had become a symbol of everything I'd worked for: independence, determination, and a sense of accomplishment. With this goal in mind, I set out to maximize every opportunity before the season ended. Leaf cleanup had become my bread and butter as fall progressed, but one job stood out above the rest. A local real estate agent approached me with a proposition. Her newest listing had an overgrown yard that needed significant attention before it could go on the market. She promised a generous payment if I could transform the property within a tight deadline. It was exactly the kind of challenge I thrived on. When I arrived at the property, the task ahead of me was daunting. The yard was littered with fallen branches, knee-high weeds, and piles of soggy leaves. The flower beds were unrecognizable, buried beneath a thick layer of debris. To make matters worse, the weather forecast predicted rain later in the week, giving me only 3 days to complete the job. I threw myself into the work with relentless focus. From dawn until dusk, I raked, trimmed, and hauled away load after load of debris. My arms ached, and my back protested with every movement, but I kept pushing. By the end of the second day, progress was evident. The yard had begun to take shape, its neglected beauty slowly emerging. On the final day, as I put the finishing touches on the flower beds and trimmed the last of the hedges, the homeowner stopped by to inspect my progress. Her reaction was priceless. She was thrilled, not just with the results but with the speed and professionalism I demonstrated. The generous payment she handed me felt like a reward for every blister, every late night, and every moment of doubt I'd faced throughout the year. That job became the cornerstone of my grand finale strategy. Bolstered by the success, I reached out to other real estate agents in the area, offering similar services for their listings. Within days, I secured 2 more contracts. Each job was grueling but rewarding, and by the end of November, I'd surpassed my financial goal. The bike I dreamed of was finally mine, but the pride I felt went far beyond the material reward. Yet, the end of the season wasn't without its challenges. As I wrapped up my final jobs, an unexpected cold snap brought an early frost, complicating the cleanup process. Leaves froze to the ground, equipment became harder to operate, and my hands stung from the biting chill. In one particularly memorable incident, a sudden sleet storm caught me mid-job, leaving me drenched and shivering as I scrambled to finish. It was a harsh reminder of how unpredictable the work could be, but it also reinforced my resilience. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I'd grown. the season had been about more than earning money or building a business. It had been a crash course in perseverance, adaptability, and self-discovery. I'd learned to navigate setbacks with creativity, to seize opportunities with confidence, and to value the relationships that had supported me along the way. One of the most unexpected lessons came in the form of gratitude. Throughout the year, I'd been focused on what I could achieve, but as the season came to a close, I found myself reflecting on the people who had made it possible. My dad, with his unwavering support and practical advice. Ben, who had stepped in whenever I needed an extra hand. Mr. Hawthorne, whose mentorship had opened my eyes to the bigger picture. And, of course, my clients, who had trusted me with their lawns and encouraged me with their feedback. As December approached, I began winding down my operations. The quiet months of winter stretched ahead, offering a much-needed break and a chance to plan for the future. For the first time, I allowed myself to dream about what came next. Maybe I'd expand my services in the spring, or perhaps I'd explore entirely new ventures. Whatever the future held, I knew I was ready for it. The grand finale of my first entrepreneurial year was more than just the sum of its parts. It was the culmination of every lesson, every challenge, and every triumph I'd experienced. And as I pedaled my new bike down the familiar streets of my neighborhood, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride and anticipation. This was only the beginning. Winter descended, wrapping the world in a quiet stillness. With the lawnmower stowed away and my notebook closed for the season, I finally had time to reflect on what the year had meant to me. The crisp air outside seemed to mirror the clarity I felt within. My first entrepreneurial venture had started as a simple way to earn pocket money but had grown into something far more profound, a journey of discovery that revealed what I was capable of when I put my mind to it. As I sat by the window, watching the first snowfall of the season, my thoughts turned to the future. What had this summer taught me? What would I carry forward? The answers weren't just about lawn care or running a business. They were about the kind of person I wanted to be: resilient, resourceful, and always willing to try. The lessons were everywhere. I'd learned the value of hard work, not as a buzzword, but as a lived experience. Those blistering summer days, the sweat-soaked shirts, and the endless push of the mower had taught me that effort pays off, not always immediately, but always eventually. I'd also learned the importance of relationships. From my dad's practical wisdom to Ben's camaraderie, from Mr. Hawthorne's mentorship to the trust of my clients, I'd realized that no one succeeds alone. These connections were the real foundation of my success. Perhaps the most surprising lesson was about growth, not just financial or professional, but personal. There had been moments when I doubted myself, when the weight of setbacks felt unbearable. But each time, I'd found a way forward. Those moments of perseverance, small as they seemed at the time, became defining. They showed me that I was capable of more than I'd believed. With the quiet months ahead, I saw an opportunity to plan for what was next. My dad suggested I use the winter to research new services I could offer in the spring. I took his advice, spending hours reading about sustainable landscaping practices, irrigation systems, and even snow removal for those rare Tennessee winters when the white stuff stuck around long enough to matter. The possibilities felt endless. I also thought about ways to give back. The community cleanup had shown me how rewarding it was to contribute to something bigger than myself. Perhaps in the coming year, I could organize my own event or partner with local organizations to make an even greater impact. The idea excited me, a chance to combine my business with a sense of purpose. One evening, as I flipped through my notebook, I found myself smiling at the scribbled notes, the crossed-out appointments, and the carefully tracked earnings. Each page told a story, not just of work done but of growth achieved. I realized that while the numbers mattered, they weren't the true measure of success. What mattered were the lessons learned, the people helped, and the goals reached despite the obstacles. The bike I'd worked so hard for sat gleaming in the corner of the garage, a symbol of everything the year had been. Every time I looked at it, I felt a surge of pride, not just in the object itself, but in the journey it represented. It wasn't just a bike, it was a testament to effort, perseverance, and the rewards of taking a chance. As the year drew to a close, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't the end of my entrepreneurial journey, it was merely the beginning. Whether I continued with lawn care or ventured into something entirely new, I knew I'd carry the lessons of this year with me. The confidence I'd built, the skills I'd gained, and the connections I'd made would all serve as stepping stones to whatever came next. The following spring, as the first hints of green returned to the neighborhood, I would be ready. Ready to take on new challenges, to expand my horizons, and to see just how far this journey could go. For now, though, I allowed myself to rest, to appreciate the quiet satisfaction of a year well spent. The work might have paused, but the spark it ignited would burn brightly for years to come.